Welcome to another video from Demystifying Proposals. In this video, we touch on how to build a schedule, the best way to organize the time for proposal development. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Also subscribe to our channel and click on the bell to be notified of future videos. Please leave comments on anything you would suggest we improve, or if you have good things to say. We're always interested in that as well. Step 1, RFP information. You start building your schedule with the RFP dates. Day 1 is the day the RFP dropped. That's when the fun starts. The last day is the day the proposal is due. Don't forget to note on the schedule the time the proposal is due. And remember, not all customers are in the Eastern time zone, so pay attention. Also include how the proposal is to be submitted. Portal submissions are usually troublesome, with many companies uploading at the same time. So take that into account when you think about your submission time. Email submissions are the easiest to do, usually. And the rare hard copy submission means a different kind of production and often will take more time on the schedule. Then be sure to add the time when the question submissions are due. That also is defined in the RFP. Next, add in some of the basics. You want to have your proposal kickoff as close to the beginning of the schedule as possible. This helps get the team organized and make sure that everybody is on the same page and make sure everyone is aware of the schedule. You'll also need to include when the questions are due to the proposal manager for consolidation. And usually you hold a questions vetting meeting to discuss all the questions, the wording of the questions, and which ones you're going to submit. This is an example schedule with all of that information completed. Step 2 is the submission time. As noted before, submission is different depending on how you're going to be submitting. These days, most proposal submissions are via email. Most companies have the contracts team do that submission. Make sure that you have any language for the submission email ready well in advance, and make sure contracts is aware of how many and what kind of files you'll be submitting. Be sure to submit with enough time for the customer to send you a confirmation of receipt of your proposal before the submission time. So submit several hours in advance. Be sure to ask for a read receipt and be sure to ask for an email acknowledgement. Portals have a tendency not to work every time, all the time. So consider that with your portal submission. There are going to be lots of people using them at the same time, and some portals get a little wonky with simultaneous use. File attachments also can be hard to do, especially if you aren't familiar with the portal that you're going to be using. Make sure to give your contracts team time to submit well in advance. Submit long enough in advance to get a confirmation email before the proposal submission time, assuming that the portal gives confirmation emails. Also, be sure to do a screen capture of your submission with a timestamp just in case. Although rare these days, sometimes proposals have to be submitted in hard copy. So in your schedule, plan for early delivery and also plan for more than one path for delivery. In the early days, we would produce 2 sets of proposal volumes and send 2 cars taking 2 different routes to the delivery location. If you have to do delivery in another state, that requires even more time added to the schedule. So plan for these things as you're building your proposal schedule. Also, be sure to use a delivery receipt. On your delivery receipt, request the signature from the customer acknowledging your on-time submission. Otherwise, you'll have no record to verify you submitted on time. And then scan the receipt and save the scan with the final proposal files. Usually contracts is the one who does that. Step 3 in your proposal schedule is factoring in production time. How much time you schedule for production depends on how many volumes or files you have, Do you have to convert the file types from Word to PDF, for example? And do you have to worry about file sizes? So breaking those down in a little more detail, the more complicated proposals with lots of volumes and lots of files will take longer to finalize and be ready for submission. So take that into account when you're building your schedule. When you have to convert file types from Word to PDF, for example, generally speaking, that works out pretty smoothly, but it doesn't always. So you need to account for something going wrong in your proposal schedule. Give yourself enough time to recover if you have to. File sizes is something that sometimes the government doesn't include in the RFP, but you should be aware of what your customers' restrictions might be with regard to file sizes for an email submission or a portal submission. If there are lots of graphics in the file, even in a PDF, the file size may be too large for the submission. So you may end up having to split your document into multiple files. And again, that takes time. So think about that as you're building your schedule. So cost volumes can get very large, especially if you have to incorporate subs pricing, terms and conditions, etc. This is a classic example of where you may develop a PDF, but then have to split the PDF into multiple files in order to make each file the appropriate file size for submission. So if it's a simple submission, so a simple submission is, for example, 3 or 4 files, 2 or 3 PDF files for the technical and management volumes, a cost narrative, and a cost spreadsheet. Usually you can finish production in a couple of hours. If it's a complicated submission, if you haven't done a similar proposal before, try doing production on your red team files to get a sense of how long it's going to take. And make sure to put a generous amount of time into your schedule for production, just in case. If things go wrong, you want to have the ability to not panic and take your time. Also, be sure to have someone else look at the files once they're ready, the contracts team or the capture manager, or both, to make sure that the files are complete and that there haven't been any glitches in the conversion of a Word file to a PDF file, for example, or if you have to merge more than one PDF file together. Always good to have a second pair of eyes on everything. So hard copy submissions are a whole other matter. What kind of access do you have to a printer? And do you have an in-house print shop, or are you going to be using an external print shop? Obviously, an external print shop, you're going to have to allow more time in your proposal schedule because usually you're not the only customer that they have, and you need to make sure that they're aware of your schedule and book in advance. Same with your in-house print shop, but you might have a little more flexibility depending on their schedules, but it's always good to give them a heads up as well. You're going to need supplies, so you might need paper. Make sure that you always have much more than you're going to need because you're going to have to reprint pages. That's just the way the proposals work. You might catch something at the last minute, something might go wrong in the printing. Just count on having to reprint pages. And remember that you may be printing 2 copies of everything. Like I said before, in the old days, we would print 2 copies and send them in 2 different directions with 2 different cars. That's not always the case anymore, depending on how paranoid you are, but you have to take that into account. You may need heavy stock for the cover graphic. Again, this is something we used to do back in the old days. And you would take that heavy stock cover graphic and slide it into the cover of the binder or notebook. Just makes it look particularly professional. Then you're going to need notebooks and binders. Remember, you may be printing 2 copies of everything. And also remember that you need to understand the sizes of the notebooks that you may need. So you may not need a very thick notebook for your management volume, for example, but you may need a super thick binder for your cost volume if it is a very complicated cost volume. So think about all of those things when you're thinking about your production times and your proposal schedule. Dividers are not always used, but sometimes they can be helpful in a complex proposal. That's usually a nice to have, not necessarily required. Sometimes. Also, sometimes they require you to have CDs or flash drives of the proposal. Again, this is something that's fairly rare these days, but most computers these days, most of the or organizations' laptops probably don't have a CD drive anymore. And sometimes you're not able to use flash drives on your work computers. So you need to take that into account. You may need an external CD drive. You may need something to create a flash drive. So it's impossible for us to say exactly how much time you're going to need in your schedule for production in a hard copy submission. There are just too many variables for us to figure it out. But you should, and you should overestimate how much time it's going to take. This is an example schedule, including the information from steps 2 and 3. In this case, as noted on day 30 of the proposal, this is an email submission. So proposal submission is scheduled for the day before, and production should usually only take about a day. So that's scheduled for the Friday before. Step 4 in building your schedule is scheduling your color reviews. The first thing you put in your schedule is your white glove. Usually you schedule your white glove for a day or two before production. If you have a complicated proposal, you may need more time for white glove. Most white glove sessions these days are conducted in real time, either as a virtual meeting with all participants in their respective locations or as an in-person meeting. Either way, you're going to project the file and make the updates in real time because there should be very few updates. If you're doing an in-person meeting, you may share a printed copy and make sure that the proposal manager has the files open and make any changes in real time. Again, there should be very few updates. Remember, white glove should be a 100% complete proposal and only to ensure that the document is clean, has no typos, and all the graphics are final. No other changes should be accepted. Usually you schedule your gold team for about 3 or 4 days before white glove. Remember, our definition of gold team is a 95% complete document. And your gold team should be a unified document. Your technical edit should be completed. The price volume should be included in the review. Your proposal content should be 95% complete, with the possible exception of maybe some graphics or information coming from partners. You're late in the schedule, so you want the document to be as complete as possible. Next, you go back to the beginning of the schedule and put in your pink team. Usually your pink team is within about a week of your RFP drop. That depends a little bit on how much time you've had to prepare. Hopefully you've had time to prepare content pre-RFP. So then you can do your pink team a little bit faster on the schedule. If you haven't, then you need to take more time for the authors to develop the content. And as a reminder, your pink team should be about 80% of your content, and it should be a chance for the authors to write to every requirement, though some sections may be only outlined, but you want to show enough detail that the reviewers understand the path you're intended to take, but it should also be drafty enough that if the reviewers tell you that you need to change direction, you can do that. Red team is usually scheduled about a week after pink team. Again, the timing depends on how much preparation you have done before the RFP dropped. You also want to consider how your pink team went. If it didn't go well, you may need more time between pink and red to get the drafts to a quality level. In a perfect world, your red team would be about 90% complete content. So you would have a pretty complete proposal which shows all the elements you intend to have in the final version. And you should have graphics incorporated, and you should be formatted, and you should be able to show what the author intends. At this point, sections with no content are unacceptable. Your green team 1 is usually scheduled at about the same time as red team. This gives you a preliminary look at your pricing, and then you can evaluate how close you are to your price to win, or how close you are to your competitors' pricing, so you can understand what you need to adjust. Don't forget also, as the proposal manager, to push for the cost narrative to start being developed at the same time as Green Team 1. A lot of times, people don't focus on the cost narrative, they just focus on the price to win. But the cost narrative is important to develop, and so you should start on that at Green Team 1. Green Team 2 is generally scheduled for about the same time as Gold Team. Again, at this point, you should have pretty close to final pricing, just as your technical and management should also be pretty finalized. Step 5 of building your proposal schedule is to make sure that you have the capture manager, the pricing team, and the contracts team review it. Your capture manager is your partner in the proposal development process. So you want to make sure that he or she is aware of the schedule so they can help ensure that the proposal team is ready for each review. The capture manager also participates in the green team reviews to make sure that price to win is achieved. Pricing is a big part of what the capture manager does during the proposal development process. Your pricing team will manage the green team reviews, so they should be aware of when those are scheduled and make sure that it will meet their needs. They also develop the cost narrative and the pricing spreadsheets. And any timelines associated with those things should also be reviewed by the pricing team. The contracts team will also review the cost narrative and the pricing spreadsheets. They participate in the green teams, but they also are responsible for other volumes such as terms and conditions, organizational conflict of interest, things like that. They'll also be involved in signing the SF forms, the SF33s, or other forms that need a signature that binds the company. Finally, the contracts team is going to be who submits the questions and who submits the proposal documents when they're ready. So here's a look at a completed schedule. So here's an example of a completed schedule for a 30-day turn on a proposal. Note we've now added pink team, red team, gold team, white glove, and green teams. Note also that we added the times that we expect drafts from the authors for the pink team and the red team and the gold team. It's important for the authors to have that information as well. So this is what a completed schedule would look like. Depending on how many days you have, you would need to adjust everything, but this gets you started. We hope that this video helps you figure out how to develop your proposal schedule based on the RFP requirements and your production schedule.